Hello there, Elvis Presley fans. This is a video a long time in the making, and I thought I would just do it. I am an Elvis Presley fan. First of all, let me put that out there, because I think people, when I've commented about this on other Elvis fan YouTube channels, people seem to get the wrong impression because I was speaking legally. And sometimes in a legal sense, we don't always get what's right or what we feel is right. In this battle where Elvis fans do not want Priscilla to be buried at Graceland for many reasons. We can list all the reasons. And if you're an Elvis fan, most likely, if you're not a new Elvis fan, sometimes people became new Elvis fans, and then they saw the Priscilla movie, and then they got a whole different view of Elvis that made them turn against Elvis very quickly. And if you're a lifelong Elvis fan like I am, and like my mother was, and she remembers when Elvis came out, as well as her friends of hers that I've known until they died, the pursuit of knowing Elvis, learning about him, learning the type of person that he was, and living a life from my expertise as a woman of abuse, of lifelong abuse, as well as being an abused wife, not just boyfriends, but abused wife, and what a truly abusive person actually is. And I'll discuss that more in another video, why I don't have blinders on because being a fan of Elvis, because I'm very quick to truly be honest about it. Because if somebody truly is abusive, I'm the type of person, new evidence comes out, I'm the type of person that says, look, you've got to look at it. You've got to look it right in the face and see what it is. If it's true, you certainly don't want to continue to be a fan and defend them if it's true. But in a legal sense, you have to investigate and you have to be ready for the evidence, which I have done. And I've compared it with my experience, and I've compared it with working with, after you go through women's groups, abused women's groups, and working with other abused people, then you can go through training. So you can learn about abuse, all the different types of abuse, and to counsel people who have been abused. So I have a large scope on this, and there's no way I would defend Elvis in any way, shape, or form if I thought there was one iota that any of this stuff that she said is true. But I'm going to address that in another video. But I have to present this first because I got some retaliation from Elvis fans, and even the person who, a very good channel, very informative channel. I love all the Elvis channels out there. They're very good. They're very loving. They're very informative. Except when I spoke in a legal sense, I don't think they truly understood what I was saying. Their perspective was that they think they've found some legal loophole where Priscilla, Lisa Marie, fixed it so Priscilla cannot be buried at Graceland. And unfortunately, well, unfortunately for me, they asked the audience, do you have any information from Tennessee? Have you checked at Memphis, the courts? Has anyone filed to see if someone has, they want to put another burial at Graceland? Or is that going to be stopped? Is Riley going to make sure that that doesn't happen? They asked the audience. So I spoke in a legal sense after I looked up what the law is in Tennessee and in Memphis. I understood the law on burials, cemeteries, rights, all that stuff. So I did my work. I'm no longer working as a paralegal, but I worked for years, and I've worked on hundreds of cases, as well as other types of legal cases. But I've worked on many, hundreds, I would say, estate cases. I worked for 8 different attorneys. So basically, you just have to do it all. But I've worked on enough of these and worked with enough divorces, custody battles, estates, what happens with everything, to see a grand picture on what might happen in the future, where we're basically looking in the future, what Harper and Finley will decide. And as I understand that Elvis fans feel that there's no way. Riley put her foot down. She said no, originally said no, but then she agreed. And by court order, an agreement was met, and the judge signed off on it, that Priscilla would be buried at Graceland. But somehow people are thinking that, well, when Finley and Harper get older, they're not going to allow it. It isn't going to happen. Or somehow Lisa Marie figured out something, and basically telling them that actually you're wrong about this. And this person lives in another country. Maybe English isn't their first language. Maybe they kind of, even though they're speaking English, maybe they kind of don't know the ins and outs of estate matters and how these things work, because they're looking at the legalese and trying to find a loophole. Everything that I read, and even what they presented, which is interesting. So we'll start with their presentation was that after Elvis was originally buried in a mausoleum down the road with his mother, but someone broke in. So Vernon decided to have a cemetery made. You may know this, but I'm just going to say this for people who don't know. So we're just going to look at the whole picture at the moment, okay? And no, I'm an Elvis fan. My mother was born on Elvis's birthday, and my father died on Elvis's birthday, which is also my mother's birthday. So there was kind of like Elvis kind of touched the whole family. So there's a closeness to Elvis, but at the same time, like I said, I was ready to believe all those lies when they were presented. We have proof. We have the women that Elvis met when they were 14 years old that he hung around with, and they're going to come and speak tonight. I was like, oh my good Lord. And I was saying, it was a woman who's been sexually abused as well. When I was young, I was saying, well, you know what? You love Elvis, you defend Elvis, but you got to hear this out. And come to find out, there's nothing here. So even though I must be legally prepared to look at the evidence and decide, looking at the evidence, I found that was a big lie. But I'll address that in another video. So speaking about the meditation garden, Vernon filled out legal documents with the city of Memphis, and it was approved by the council and signed off by the mayor to have a small cemetery at Graceland, which is now known as the Meditation Garden. And he asked at the time for 6 burials. And my first question is why 6 burials? Why just 6 burials? Hello there, Black Samurai. How are you? Good to see you. God bless you for showing up. So my question is, legally, you have to ask questions on everything. And this question was not asked by this particular channel. Like I said, a good man, informative, maybe kind of, people, I think, of Elvis fans might think that I might be speaking for Priscilla or on Priscilla's side when I actually wasn't. I was just talking legally. My first question is, why 6 burials at Graceland? Why did he ask for 6? And his idea was that Lisa Marie, knowing that there were just 6 burials that were approved by the city council, there can be no more. That was it, just 6. Nobody wants it to be huge. Nobody wants it to be a big. Well, the assumption is that people, Elvis fans, are making, well, the city really didn't want 6. They only gave him 6. They don't want a cemetery. The city of Memphis doesn't want a cemetery there. And so there's a lot of assumptions being thrown around. I'm going, these are just assumptions. And they're never going to prove any more than 6. So Lisa made this very cool, calculated move by having Benjamin buried there. And that's the 6th one. There are no more. And the city of Memphis won't allow any more burials since Benjamin was buried there. My question is, why was there 6? You had Minnie Mae, Minnie Mae, his grandmother's buried there, his mother and his father. Elvis is buried there. And then you have 2 more. One of them would have to be Lisa, right? Who is the 6th? Who is the 6th? Why did they give him 6? If he didn't need 6 and he didn't want 6 and he didn't want it to be 6, why did he get 6? Now, people began to argue with me that I wasn't being clear. I go, you don't understand. When I say the city, now the city could decide no more than 6, but legally, the meditation garden is legally a cemetery. Now, it is not a private cemetery. Why? Because it is legally a cemetery of the state of Tennessee. I've read all the legal documents. I went online. I've done this many times to disprove a lot of things that people say about, they don't understand what went on. And sometimes I have to go back into history to find what went on and why was this legal decision made. There are some estates that have 1 or 2 burials, and it's not considered a cemetery. It's just 1 or 2 burials, or just a private family plot. And those are not technically authorized as from the state as a cemetery. So nobody can go visit them at any time. But the reason why Graceland, which you have to pay to get into Graceland, it's not, you can't go in there for free. It's not just a free and open park anyway. It is, you have to pay to get in there, but because it is legally a cemetery, and people were arguing back and forth with me, it's not really a cemetery. It's not technically legally a cemetery. It's not really a cemetery. Yes, it is, because if it wasn't legally recognized cemetery, that was not a private cemetery by the state of Tennessee, then they would not have ordered, yes, you can have these burials. This is a cemetery. People must be able to visit the cemetery for free. The cemetery meditation garden is open for free for an hour a day in the morning before business hours. So anybody can go there. That's a legal cemetery. That's not a private cemetery, which means that's a legal cemetery that the state of Tennessee has authorized to be a cemetery. And in looking at that, if it was private, then the owner of the home could say, nobody else can be buried there. This is just only family members. They can set the rules. But in this case, this is a legally recognized cemetery that must be open to the public. So there's more going on here. Why did Vernon ask for 6? Now, it's interesting. I'm actually glad that people did try to argue with me about this, but nobody really listened to what I was saying. Neither did the channel. The guy who ran the channel was talking to one of the people replying to me, agreed with him. Oh yes, that must be right. Priscilla is not a blood relative. That's right. You've got it. And kept hearting her comments. And I go, wait a second, you don't understand. Please, I'm speaking legally, and I'm trying to explain to you something that they might not understand what's going on. Why is there a 6th burial? Now, if it had something to do with only Elvis's blood being buried there and nobody else but Elvis's blood, well, then legally, Lisa Marie couldn't be buried there because she has Priscilla's blood. Legally, why would, if it's about only people with Elvis's blood being buried there, then, and they really don't want any more than 6, then at the time when Vernon asked for the plots, asked for the 6 plots, why did he ask for a 6th plot? Well, at the time, what was he thinking? Lisa was a child. Did he assume Lisa was going to die and never get married and have children? If she had children, there would be blood relatives to Elvis. She may have been married for the rest of her life. Maybe she would want her husband buried there. So is the plot for her husband? But if it's for Elvis's blood, if it has something to do with Elvis's blood relatives, then her husband could never be married. It could never be buried next to her. And I would think if Lisa stayed married and had children and a family, she would probably want to be buried next to her husband. So she, by right, should be buried at Graceland. And I think that was the assumption of Vernon. But she would also want her husband, but he's not a blood relative. So what would happen to her children? So if you put him in that grave, what would happen to her children? Or did Vernon assume that since it's only Elvis's blood relatives, that she would only have one child and her husband would be buried somewhere else? If she had more than one child, none of the children could be buried there. So the idea that there's only 6 and there can never be any more and nobody can be buried there, but since Priscilla is not a blood relation to Elvis, she's not allowed to be buried there. Well, legally speaking, this is speaking as an Elvis fan who will tell you in another video. We'll take Priscilla apart, her arguments apart, and how quickly they fall flat, and the other arguments about him and 14-year-olds and all that stuff. We can take those apart in other videos, but we're just going to stick with this now. And fortunately for Elvis, I've experienced legally and I've experienced with abuse, so I can take Priscilla's story apart as well. So every single child of Lisa's grandchildren from here to kingdom come, if it's only blood relatives, then if that's the argument, and that's a good idea, right? You know, the guy or the channel, like, that was a good idea. It's only blood relatives. Then you'll have blood relatives from here to kingdom come. And if your argument is that the city of Memphis doesn't want it any larger than 6, then what happens to all the blood relatives? And if your argument is, well, Priscilla isn't a blood relative, Yes, she is. Not of Elvis, but Elvis had one child with one woman, and that one child has Priscilla's blood. And everyone descended from Elvis has her blood, all her grandchildren. So if it's only 6 and it's only supposed to be 6, and it may be only supposed to be 6, maybe that was the intention, then Vernon did not include Lisa's husband, should she have been married to Lisa's husband for the rest of her life. But she would have wanted to be buried next to him. And there's no way she would not wanted to have been buried at Graceland near her father. So that burial, if that was the plan, then Vernon didn't account for the husband. And if it was Lisa's children, Lisa at the time was a child. Apparently he wasn't thinking of Lisa's children because she had 4 children. 1 committed suicide, and then she has 3 living children. So he didn't account for Lisa's children. What was he accounting for? What was he thinking about when he asked for 6? So and if you say that the argument is it's not really a cemetery. Yes, it is legally explained that. They don't really want it. The city of Memphis doesn't want it to be really, really big and keep growing. Well, then if it's only, and you're saying it's only blood relatives, then you're going to exclude all of Lisa Marie's children. She has 4 children. 1 is buried there now with her. She has 3 other children. If you're not going to expand the cemetery, then those 3 other her children of Lisa Marie will never be buried there. And they are Elvis's blood relatives. In fact, they're his only grandchildren. And then there will be Elvis's great-grandchildren. So did Vernon assume that Lisa was going to die or she will never have children? Presently, she was a little girl when he had that cemetery put in. And he asked for 6 specifically. Who was the 6th that he intended to bury there? Now, there's a question I ask, why did he agree to that 6th one? And we can look at that. Everyone who lived at Graceland, the family of Elvis, who lived there, Minnie Mae, Elvis's mother, Elvis's father, Elvis, Lisa Marie, and Priscilla. That was Elvis's family. Now, if Elvis did get married again, then there may be a spot for her, the present wife, right? If they had children, he may have asked for spots for them, because you would have to. It wouldn't be just Lisa. If you got married again, you would have to have room. He would have asked for room for whatever children were born of Elvis. And if he was married to a new wife, she would be buried there too, wouldn't she? But she's not Elvis's blood. But by gum, Elvis, the mother of Elvis's children, she was married or not, would have been buried there. So the likelihood is that spot is Priscilla's, was always Priscilla's. Now, why did Vernon make that decision? Because Lisa was living with Priscilla. That was Lisa's family. That's the only family Lisa had left, was her mother. Vernon was old. He died soon after. So he knew that he wouldn't be. Her direct family was Priscilla. At the time she left him, things didn't work out. And we can talk about the particulars of what she did 6 months after She gave birth to Lisa, what she wrote in her book, Elvis and Me, about her plans for Lisa when she was pregnant, which are terrible. You can kind of, but that book was written long after Vernon died. Remember, Vernon died, and that all this stuff came out long after Vernon died. All these things in the movie and all that came out later. I'm thinking, now it's possible that she said, I want to be buried there, Vernon. I'm Lisa's mother. I was the only wife to Elvis. I want to be buried there. She could have said, I was 14 when he met me. Though, according to her, though her story does change, but this one aspect of the story never changed, is that he never did anything with her. And she didn't move in until she was about 2 months shy of 18, technically an adult, and didn't marry her until she was almost 22. So he didn't marry her until she was adult either, and didn't do anything with her relations until he married her, and he waited till almost 22. That's actually pretty good. But who knows? Maybe she was planning that book and she said, there's a lot of things I could say. I was 14. I want to get buried there. He was the king of rock and roll. She was the queen. The queen wants to be buried at the mansion. Now, it's possible that she said that to Vernon. It's possible that she intimidated him. Maybe she used her womanly wiles, because Priscilla has always been known or seen as, and don't throw a stone at me for saying this, almost too pretty. Just really very, very pretty. Just men really loved her, were very attracted to her. So did Vernon find her attractive and say, it didn't take much womanly wiles to get him to agree to that 6th burial plot? Those things didn't need to happen at all for Vernon to decide to have Priscilla buried there. I'd say that it's just, she's Lisa's mother. Lisa's living with her. At the time, Lisa was a little child. Things may have been rocky with Elvis, but as far as he knew, and Lisa loved her mother. Isn't that Lisa didn't love her mother? Lisa spoke about her love for her mother. She loved both her parents. She realized, I think, later on that the father was, how good her father was. And I think we all learned, if you're an Elvis fan, we all learned over time. And it's almost extraordinary. It's almost unbelievable how good he was, how generous he was. But that is a story for another video. Just a generosity that I don't see anywhere else, and that he gave without even taking it off on income tax. He didn't give so he can write it off on income tax. He said, I'm giving this because if you give, you follow the Bible to a T. Do not let the left hand know what the right is doing. You don't know. You just give. You don't do it because you're seen. You don't do it to make it for your benefit in any way, whether you're looked at as a great person on the outside. That's basically, you're doing it for show. If one hand knows what the other's doing, that's what Jesus was essentially saying. So he said, no, I didn't give it to get anything. It would be wrong to take it off as an income tax expense because the gift is a gift. I didn't do it to get it off on my income tax. And he also kept anything anybody ever sent him, no matter how small it was. Some people made things, or just anything, every single thing that a fan sent him, and every single letter was filed in the filing cabinets. And that they asked him, Elvis, why did you keep all of this stuff? And he's kept it filed by who it was, who sent it, and what date, how long it was, everything. He said, well, if they took the time to send it to me, I can take the time to keep it. So this was an extraordinarily good person. And I think Vernon, knowing Elvis, was so generous, so forgiving, that he would probably want the mother of his daughter. At that time, we kind of didn't know everything she would do, and that she would contradict herself so much. And even today, after her daughter's death, she puts out that movie. You already had you wrote the book, a mini series came out on TV, then you had to do it again. He didn't know at the time, because he died like a couple years after Elvis did. I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2 years after Elvis did. He had no idea, but he knows that Elvis was forgiving, and she was the mother to his only daughter. So the decision could have been cleanly made on his own, but there would be no reason if it had to do with blood. She's not related to Elvis, then there would be only 5, right? And also there was one more thing. Give me a second. I have this light shining directly in my eyes, and sometimes there's also another legal aspect to this that I wanted to mention. Now, while I'm forgetting this, at the moment, it has something to do with the legally. But anyway, I will also want to mention about Harper and Finley, because people felt that they would make sure by the time Priscilla died, they would change their minds, and they would allow Priscilla. No, they would not allow Priscilla to be buried there. And people don't know that the custody battle between Michael Lockwood and Lisa Marie, it was very acrid, and she accused him of having child porn on the computer. And he accused her of, because she had been in and out of rehab about 5 times. And Priscilla got on camera all the time. It seems like she, throughout her life, always slipped in on something bad about Elvis. Though she's trying to be promoting Elvis, she would say something, basically, so people knew that she suffered and he was bad. So she always slipped that in about her daughter too. She never uplifted her daughter. She always talked about her daughter's faults with drugs and addiction, and she kept pushing that. So that is kind of unusual for a mother to do. But like I said, Vernon was long dead after this, and knowing that Elvis was forgiving, you have to take that into consideration. He took that all into consideration, I'm sure. Well, yes, maybe womanly wiles, and yes, she might have said, well, I could write something. I was 14. I mean, that's all speculation. That it's possible, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It could have been Vernon's complete 100% decision. She battled that, and it's very difficult when a child has a parent that has substance abuse, because working with people who were children of parents with substance abuse, they become schizophrenic, depressed. They can become drug addicts themselves. The parent isn't there. they feel that the parent cares more about the drugs and getting the drugs and the alcohol than them. That was priority. Or if they go into rehab because of that, why aren't you thinking of me? Why are you doing this? You were not in my life. You kept going away because of your substance abuse, which seemed to be, if I was your priority and you loved me and I made you happy, the child feels that their parents aren't happy. They should be happy. The child should be everything. You're made to feel important and valued. That's why children end up becoming juvenile delinquents and say, oh, the parent did everything they could, but it's really the child's fault. But sometimes you don't know what's really happening at the home, and that's the reason why. They have no value, they become outcasts, they live on the street, they get into prostitution and drug addiction, they end up dead. It's possible now, as it turned out with the custody battle, what the government did was they took Harper and Finley away from both Lisa and Michael Lockwood because they didn't know. They had to investigate to find out, is it true? Does he have child porn? Is it true? Is she doing drugs and alcohol? As it turned out, it was a complete lie. Lisa had lied about the father. Now, this doesn't look good for Lisa, and I think she was a really good person. I really, and we never should have let her die. But why did she say that about the father? She claimed that about the father before he came out and talked about her drug and alcohol abuse. The fact that she'd been in and out of rehab 5 times. Which is very difficult when you have small children and the parent is going in and out of rehab. Now, it turned out that was not true. They investigated. He did not have child porn. That was completely not true. But it was true about Lisa and her drug addiction. Her body was abused a lot. Now, we don't know what happened under Priscilla. She certainly lived under Priscilla more than Elvis. Priscilla got more. She got full custody in Elvis. She visited Elvis, and she was there at the time, and she found Elvis's dead body. So we really don't know what happened. And the fact that in public, Priscilla is stating that she doesn't really value her daughter, is constantly saying that the faults that Lisa had, constantly about not, I'm supporting her, I love her, she's a good girl, she tries hard, we're going to get her through this, don't worry, I'm by her side. It was, don't worry about the kids, I have them. Priscilla was awarded custody of Harper and Finley, the minor children, until the government, child protective agencies figured out what was actually going on. She came, I remember this happened, that she came out saying, don't worry, I have them. I'm going to take care of them. It doesn't, that Lisa is, people saying, well, Lisa's in rehab. She's in and out of drug addiction. And don't worry, I'm in their lives. She was fully present in their lives the whole time. She sided with Michael Lockwood. It was a very acrid divorce, like divorces are. And it isn't unusual for spouses to tell things that are not true so they can get more in the settlement. He tried to get as much as he could out of Lisa to get full custody. If you get full custody, usually one of the parents that has full custody is the parent that usually poisons the child the most against the other parent. I would have to say, now, Priscilla said that she made sure to teach Harper and Finley all about their grandfather. She's the one with all the stories, and she taught them about how great he really, after that movie, after the things that you keep saying about him, which turn out that you your stories are contradictory and turn out to be completely not true by other witnesses, completely falsified. You've been telling these girls their whole lives, they're young, they were children, they were impressionable. Lisa was in and out of rehab. She's doing drugs and alcohol even when she wasn't in rehab. So that means that's a parent that's not fully present. Then you've got another parent who hates the other parent. So everything they know is your mother, your mother died. You see, she died. She abused her body with drugs and alcohol. Why did she do that? Why didn't she love us? Why weren't we important? See, this is how our child thinks. Why weren't we more important? Just like two spouses, one spouse is drinking all the time and they're abusive or neglectful of the other spouse and the other one wants to just love them. Apparently, you've realized that they don't love you. You're not important. They don't value you. They value the alcohol more. They regret marrying you. So all these things go through a child's head. And since they're so young and impressionable, by someone we know both. In this case, it's both. It's the father who hated the mother, and it is the grandmother who is constantly saying not good things about her own daughter, their mother, and their grandfather. So this is all they know. This is all they know. What they know is this is their grandmother, and she was always there. She took us in. She took care of us. Everything anybody knows about Elvis, from Baz Luhrmann to you name it, Peter Grolnick, who wrote the authorized biography of Elvis. Everybody went to Priscilla because Priscilla, she was with him kind of for a long time, basically starting at 18. She met him at 14. She didn't move in until she was about 18, about 2 months shy of her 18th birthday. And her parents let her move in, and her parents let her go visit Elvis when she was 14. So personally, I think they were looking for something. They were looking for, personally, that's what I think. But, you can say I'm biased, but when you say child, then why are you letting a 14-year-old go if you care so much? Why are you pressuring Elvis to marry her and she's almost 22? Or else because you want her married to the king of rock and roll because he's making a lot of money. Personally, that's just what it looks like. That's just point blank, flat out what it looks like. So your two children, the children, what do they know? They know that this is my grandmother. The grandmother, everything, we know things about Elvis by people who were personally touched by Elvis, stories about his generosity and his goodness that come out. But everybody who wants to know the straight dope about Elvis, somehow everybody goes to Priscilla, and you have to get through Priscilla to get authorization. She's the one who opened up Graceland and got millions of dollars, untold millions of dollars. But she also belonged to Scientology. It's very costly to belong to Scientology and to be in that in-group in Hollywood and to stay in Scientology. You've got to make a lot of money. And she did, being in Hollywood and the books. There's a lot of money to be had for the man that you keep dissing for the rest of your life. But we know why the movie came out, because Lisa had cut her out and didn't want her involved in Elvis Presley, the Graceland or enterprises, or making any decisions anymore. So she wasn't getting, as a trustee, she wasn't on the board anymore. So she could have her input. But it's really so much that has been out there is really her decisions. A lot of what we know is her, because everybody went through her. So these children, everything that they know. And she said herself that she made sure that she taught them all about their grandfather, everything they needed to know about their grandfather. Tell me, between the father and the grandmother, we know what she's done so far. What do you think she told them? What do you think they know? What do you think their true impression is? But they say, the comments back, Riley will teach them. Or even the guy on the channel, Riley will teach them. Riley's their sister. She doesn't have custody. These are minor children. She is not allowed to take them aside and say, don't believe your father who has custody of you. Don't believe your grandmother who also had custody of you, who's been present in your life your whole life, teaching you all about the grandfather and your mother. That Riley's going to come in and just set the record straight. They have their father, and there's nothing like a grandmother, even if she's had that much plastic surgery. And, her colors that she wears are kind of questionable. You look a little too white and your hair is a little bit too red and you're wearing too much black. I don't know. There's a look to you. Which is interesting that Scientology was invented by a guy who was into the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, who was friends with them, and also Crowley, Aleister Crowley. So Satanism is actually at the base of Scientology. But that's, if you look really deep into Scientology and the investigations, and people have been in it who've exposed a lot of it. But it's also was publicized who he was friends with. I mean, you can actually find publications that this is who this L. Ron Hubbard was friends with. But that's interesting. But that could be just her color choice. So if you're dependent on Harper and Findlay, now here's one very important legal aspect here. Working with families and abused people and legal and estates and all this stuff. I'm just the whole thing. Legally, when they come of age, it is no longer Riley 100% in charge of whatever operations were left, because Elvis Presley Enterprises was sold. Elvis sold his back catalog because Priscilla wanted more money. So he sold all his back catalog at the time because she wanted more and more and more. And Lisa's attorney, unbeknownst to her, sold Elvis, the rest of Elvis's music. She lost that. Now, if your attorney does something like that, sells unbeknownst to you all the music that you're making money on, your father's music, it's not just money, it's your rights to your father's music, you can take them to court. She said she had no idea. It was out of her hands. It just happened. She didn't know he did that, and she was very upset that he did that. I'm telling you, legally, she knew he did that. She authorized it, because legally he can't do that. Legally he had to have been authorized. Otherwise, she could take him to court and sue to get that back. So that did not happen. That was also something that wasn't true. Now, I think she had a very good heart. I think she had a difficult life with Priscilla. I think Priscilla messed with her mind. And also, Priscilla put her into Scientology, which messes with your mind. They audit you. They go through your brain. It's like they open your brain up and look into it. It's kind of like when we hear about these implants that we may get in our brain by some kind of Bond supervillain, that we get little videos leaked all the time. It's kind of like that. They did it because an implant hadn't been invented yet. But that's what the auditing does. And Lisa said that they took everything from her. They took her money. they demanded money from Lisa. She had to pay a lot of money, probably why she sold her father's catalog. They made her, the depression, her mother as a child made her get into Scientology. That totally screwed her up. That was totally out of her hands. So you can forgive a lot of what happened, a lot of what she did, and a lot of what happened. We can forgive her. We're adults. We can understand. We're not her children, and seeing and feeling it from a different, maybe when they grow up, they can kind of step back and look at all this and say, we understand what happened to our mother. We understand. And I would say it wasn't because Elvis was into drugs or the family was into drugs. Not true. They were hardworking people that worked. At one time, the mother was working 12 hours a day. She had no time to drink alcohol. They had no money to drink alcohol. And Elvis had a lot of health problems. So, but when you have a mother that is telling you that your father is a drug addict, he died of drugs. The mother was, she's the one who told people, oh yeah, the mother drank. And the mother really didn't, according to medical records. That's actually not true. It keeps going around. The reason why it's going around, it was in the Elvis movie by Baz Luhrmann, is because Priscilla said it. And if you read the book Destined to Die Young by Sally Hodel, which I think came out while Priscilla was still in, had say. That should be the authorized biography. I would suggest you reading that book. But if you are told, like if a child is told that they're bad or that they're crazy, you're crazy and you're bad, you keep doing these things, a child is going to grow up not only not valued, they're going to end up being bad just because they're told that they're bad or they're crazy and they're always going to wonder about their sanity. You can screw a child up very easily. Now, my experience with abuse, I understand that part fully, what can happen to people, how you can destroy a child. And I can imagine, because Priscilla told everyone that Elvis and his mother she was an alcoholic. She died of hepatitis. Hepatitis is not, it's a result. What it is that the liver is dying, and it's a stage of the liver dying. It's not necessarily caused by alcohol. In fact, there is a disease that she had in Sally Hodel's book, that there's something that goes back and forth between the liver and the lungs that's deficient, and it ends up killing the liver and the lungs. It destroys, and she had heart issues as well. And apparently her doctor, according to Sally Hodel's research, speaking to the daughter of Gladys's heart doctor, which Elvis paid for, wanted her to have the best. He realized that she had this particular, it's very rare. So if you're Lisa and you are told that alcoholics breed alcoholics, it's a gene, it's a missing gene, it's something in the genes, and that's it, you're doomed. Your father died of drugs, they were all addicts, it's in your genes, and you're told this your whole life, you're most likely going to become an alcoholic, whether that's true or not, whether it's actually because of an illness that's going to happen. If Scientology truly controls you and messes with your brain, the auditing, it sounds like that's our future for everybody. But the auditing, if you know about what Scientology, how they basically, you're brainwashed, it's complete control. And in turn, you become a star and you can make a lot of money. So the stars that belong to Scientology are untouchable. And they wanted Elvis, by the way. They solicited Elvis first because they wanted the biggest and the one that was pulling in the most money. And there's nothing like Elvis. They can get Elvis. They can get all of Hollywood. Everybody would come on board. But he was given Dianetics. He was given the literature on Scientology. And Elvis read it and said, this sounds really good, like psychologically, it sounds really good. But there's no God at the base of it. So he rejected it. But they got Graceland anyway. They got Priscilla because they promised stardom. And she was, like Baz Luhrmann said, American royalty. I was told it was really the Kennedys that were American royalty. But since Elvis was the king, he came up from nothing. Priscilla had a much better upbringing. The family, money, much better. She didn't come from poverty like Elvis in the South, and where he lived and how badly, it's just how difficult it was. She didn't know that, but being the queen, she married to Elvis, promised, money. You grab onto Scientology, they promise you fame, and what she did, she got fame in Hollywood. But see, if you're told that you've got that gene, the alcohol, like people Irish descent have that gene, Native Americans, they say, have that gene. It's passed on through certain racial demographic, and really ethnicities. It's I don't know if you call Irish or we always use the word races, but it's usually a group of people, a common disease or something that is usually a group of people that marry into each other. Not necessarily cousins marrying cousins, but it's just that a small group of people that have married into each other and have lived in a certain, Ireland is an island basically, and they share the same religion, so it becomes more common to have that particular gene. So if you're told I'm not, this is from your father, I don't have this. This is your fate. So between with Scientology, she said they took her money, they took her life, they took her soul, they took everything from her. They broke her. They completely broke her. And I think she was a giving, loving, vulnerable person. So that's why hopefully one day Harper and Finley will understand the truth about Scientology, understand the truth about what the grandmother may have, how she grew up. But you see, Priscilla knows that the future probably knew, because when did she stop to try to save Lisa's life? The night, was it a couple nights before she died? She was at the premiere of the Golden Globes. She wanted to see the guy who played Elvis. I forget his name. The young man that played Elvis in the Elvis movie, Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie. She wanted to see him win. And if you saw her, she looked like she was dead. She looked like she had died a few days before. And if I was anyone who loved her, cared about her, was her friend or loved something, especially her mother, I'm sure she insisted, I want to be here, I don't want to go. I want to be here, I want to see him win. You say, okay, you see, you really need to go to the hospital. You don't look well. You really, this is I love you. I want you to live. I want you to be all right. This is the worst I've ever seen you. She looked like death. She looked like she was about to die. No doubt about it. I would say, look at those pictures. She no longer had it looked like her soul had already left. And that's sad to say, very sad to say. But of old people, her mother should have said, Either you're going to the hospital, or look, immediately after the show, I'm taking you, that we'll have a deal here, because I want you to live and I love you. Now, she may never have listened to her mother, or wanted to listen to her mother, but I doubt her mother even said that, because Jerry Schilling was there, who also worked for Elvis. You think that there would have been more than one person that would have said, we're just going to bring you, and just to make sure you're okay after the show. How about after the show? We're just because we're worried about you and we love you. We want you to live, and you're looking kind of pale. It just doesn't look, this is really, it looks very serious. Believe us, because we love you. See, if you really love someone, and they know that they love you, and that you're valued, you're more likely to listen. The day my father left the house, because he needed to go, he had a bladder infection, and I knew that, I said, look, Dad, and he wasn't going to go. I said, Dad, please. I broke down and cried, but they won't take you unless they get a catheter. And he kept getting infections from the catheter. It's like, and I always said, I don't want him to die of a catheter. I don't want him to die because of bladder infection. Please do something. And they said, look, if he insists on not going, we can't take him. And I said, Daddy, please. I want you to see Tom Brady win his last Super Bowl. One more Super Bowl. I want you to live to see that, Dad, please. And I almost brought, and he knew, and he said, he probably said, no, I'd like to see that too. And he did end up dying on Elvis's birthday. It was in August. But when Elvis died, and then on Elvis's birthday, he had received a certain medical intervention. He went into a coma immediately and died on January 8th. And interestingly enough, Tom Brady won the Super Bowl 1 month after. So when you express love to someone, it could be him from heavens. I knew he was going to win, especially when he hired Gronkowski, who retired and then went down to Tampa Bay. I announced, Brady's going to win the Super Bowl. I knew it. You can speak to people in a way that they understand that you care so much about them, that please go, because I want you to live. Don't you want to see this? There's something, just like a mother, Priscilla's a mother, would say to their child. You would know exactly what to say to the child, and the child listens because they know that the mother is not saying that to punish or to keep them from enjoying themselves. We just want you checked out. Had she gone that night, she got some antibiotics. They looked inside. She may be alive today. Now, Finley and Harper, we don't know, because Priscilla is the grandmother, and there's nothing like the grandmother. And even if the grandmother has done wrong, they'll say, well, she just didn't get along with Lisa. She did her best. She thought Scientology was great. She said she didn't want Christianity. She wanted an intelligent religion. Now, you could because it's your grandmother, it's your family. It could very easily, they say, well, she did her best. She tried. That might not have been the best thing, and it didn't work for Lisa, but it doesn't mean she didn't try. We know that she took us in when our mother was not in the best place. She was there for us. She's always been there for us. Our father's always been there for us. And the stories that both of them have told, they're when legally you no longer have Benjamin, you have Riley, who possibly knows the truth very well, possibly. And maybe not so, because she never knew Elvis. We kind of really don't know exactly what she knows. And how she grew up with Lisa, and was Lisa there, even if she was on drugs or alcohol, what Riley thought of that, we really, really, really don't know. So are we certain that she's going to be able to tell or convince anything to Harper and Finley? And even if she did her best and she truly believes this, they are under the influence, especially Scientology, which the mother Priscilla still belongs to. That's a brainwashing influence. Those are clever tactics, which she probably uses and doesn't know. Let's say she's innocent. She has no idea that she knows how to use those tactics, because they were, you belong to that. They're used on you. And of course, they did grow up. My mother also grew up in Scientology. If the father had died and had no influence to teach her anything, teach Lisa anything, then he won't. But at the end, she said she would spend her time. She realized he really loved her. She understood who he was, but she knew him. She spent time with him. The twins didn't, so that she truly understood who he was. And then she spent time to get away from Scientology. Elvis read 10,000 books on religion, He wanted to know how everybody came to God. And she would spend time in, his bedroom, and off the bedroom is the bathroom where he died. And there's a statue of Jesus with the Sacred Heart, because Elvis woke up. He wanted to wake up every morning. The first thing was Jesus, to think of Jesus. And before he went to bed at night, he wanted to think of Jesus, see Jesus, because you don't know when you're going to die. Just in case he dies in his sleep, the last thing he sees is Jesus. And the book he was found with was The Scientific Search for the Face of God, which is about the Shroud of Turin, the face of Jesus. And he is Larry Geller, which was his barber, and he said he would go to bed basically in the early morning, and he would take all his books that Larry Geller would get him. He would get him all these books on religion. And he said, I'm going to go into the bathroom and read. There was a barber chair in his bathroom. I know everybody says he died on the toilet, but Larry said there's a barber chair in there. And that's where he went to read his books. And in his hand, when he died, the book was The Scientific Search for the Face of God. And that night they went to play racquetball, and Elvis had asked him for that book. He'd got him a bunch of 10 more books. And he said, Elvis, it's late. I'll give you the books tomorrow. No, I want to read that book. I got to read that book about the Shroud of Turin. The face with the picture of Jesus's face. And that is the book that was in his hands when he was on the floor. So he was reading, and he didn't read on the toilet. He would read in the barber chair. So he may have been found on the floor, and I think his body was swelling up, and they say his pants weren't quite on, but you're swelling up and he's sweating. Before he died, you go into a profuse sweat, and you probably said, I've got to take whatever I have off. I can imagine what was going on when he died. But he was felt where the toilet is and where the barber chair is, there's a space, and he fell in that space. And most likely that's where he fell. But he died. He wanted to see the face of Jesus so badly that he did. Very different from Scientology. A very forgiving person. Did follow the Bible to a T. That's why he did not pay He did not, everything he gave away, he did not write off on his taxes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a gift. It would just be for show. It wouldn't be true. The sincerity of his love of God and his goodness, yes, is a whole nother show. And I've spent my lifetime learning about Elvis. And I came to Elvis more. I loved his music, but I came to him through more when I realized his spirituality, his love of God, and his gospel music. It gave me peace. I would just, no matter what was going on, I would just listen to it, sit in a rocking chair, and just fall asleep. I would just sink down, and all my anxieties would just disappear. And I would have just a peace. I could name all the songs that touched me, that brought me to that moment, like In the Garden, Somebody Bigger Than You and I. In the Garden is very touching, isn't it? Where No One Stands Alone, which Lisa sang a duo with him. They put the two of them together. And at that time, Lisa was beginning to realize, she left Scientology, and she would spend her nights in Elvis's bedroom reading those books to get closer to him, to understand God. And if you hear her singing Where No One Stands Alone with her father, you can hear not only the sincerity, but the cry of angst, of pain. They say in Billie Holiday's voice, you could hear the cry of angst in her voice, the sorrow. She sang Strange Fruit. Let you listen to that song. She would never do a gig without singing Strange Fruit. And it's a very, very sad song. I can imagine she felt she was strange fruit herself. It's about lynching in the South. And the strange fruit hanging from the tree, which Elvis, I'm sure, living in the South during that time, in the middle of the African-American community. He lived in the middle of the black section. That's where he lived, because he was not considered white. And his mother wasn't. She had Native American in her. So under the law in the South, Priscilla's never grew up under these conditions. I mean, she never grew up knowing this kind of poverty and discrimination. You see, in the South, the law was that if you were white, you could not marry someone who was not considered white. And since the mother was part Cherokee, was part, the grandmother was a Cherokee princess, mourning white dove, or mourning dove white. Sometimes it's the father can't be either. That was the law. That's how they separated people. They like to keep people separate. So likelihood somewhere in his ancestry, he wasn't considered white either. So there's a suffering that Elvis, it's really very sad. So it's understandable how Elvis fans really don't want Priscilla buried there. But when you see, there's 3 children left that will take over. They will, when they come of age, you have thirds. It's broken up into thirds, 3 equal parts, not 2, or it's 50-50. And somehow one says that, yes, she can be buried there. No, the other says no. But it's legal now. The court did decide, but somehow Elvis fans think that it's going to be changed. Once you have a 2/3 majority, even if Riley says, I want to change this, I do not want Priscilla buried at Graceland. I want to go to the city. I want to change this. First, the city is going to defer to the judge. And they'll say, well, your family, and you signed this agreement. You agreed to this. They look at that sincerely, that this agreement was made for her to be buried there. Unless Riley loses Graceland altogether and somebody else takes over. But it's still a legal cemetery at this time. So if legally the state of Tennessee recognizes that agreement that she can be buried there, and it's a legal cemetery of the state of Tennessee, because the public can go visit for free. If it was private, they could never go visit, ever. You couldn't enter the cemetery if it was actually private, but it isn't. So that's a legal aspect that most likely, one, Vernon did decide that she was the sixth. Hello there, Mark Dietz. How are you? Good to see you. Two, legally, it's legally recognized by the state of Tennessee. It's a cemetery recognized, public cemetery recognized by the state of Tennessee. So you have, it was signed off by a member of the family. And then you have two. Once you have three, even if Riley changes her mind and tries to take this back to court, you have two girls, minors, grew up knowing Priscilla throughout their whole life. She took care of them. She took custody of them. She taught them all about everything she wanted them to know. A confined can't sleep. Oh God, I hope you can sleep after this. Maybe I'll lull you to sleep. Hopefully. You've got a 2/3 majority. The likelihood, pointing out, if you go through the whole video, if you haven't watched the whole video and you go through all the points that I've made, that the conditions, the life that these two girls lived, who they were most influenced by, how a parent who is in and out because of alcohol and drug addiction, not her fault. We went through why that happened to her and why I don't think it's genetic. It may be the influence of a surviving parent and the religion that she endured, which I think broke her. Her father's religion, I think she would have survived had her father lived, definitely. He would have, she wouldn't have been a Scientologist. So you take that into account. The most likely thing, even if Riley said, I'm going to do my best to convince them and teach them everything they need to know. I do not want Priscilla buried there. Most likely, and even if it's just because she's the grandmother, just because she's the grandmother. But if you go back and the intention was, and it really does look like the intention was that sixth plot was for Priscilla when Vernon asked for 6 plots. It could be for no one else. It makes no sense. Her children, would they all be stacked up in that 6th plot? Would it bury her and her husband on top of each other? And then the 6th plot, all the children that she could have ever had. What about where the grandchildren go? You just keep stacking them up. If the idea is you don't want to make the cemetery any bigger, and they can't make the cemetery bigger. Priscilla is in blood, but the husband is in blood. I'm sure Lisa would want the husband buried. You see, it doesn't make any sense. She, as a minor child, Lisa was a minor child. Priscilla was Elvis's wife. Vernon died a couple years after Elvis did. He didn't live long after, so he had no idea. No idea. And probably knowing Elvis was forgiving and the right thing to do, because the mother would be taking care of the child for her life. That's the likelihood legally, and that could be the reason why the judge decided. He may have, look, we don't have all the documents, haven't all been released. And he could have read that intentionally when he submitted it to the council. Priscilla's name was most likely on there. And it didn't have to be her womanly wiles, though it could have been. It could have been her saying, well, I was 14. I could say it doesn't have to be at all. It doesn't have to be at all. She's Lisa's mother, and she is the grandmother to every blood relative descendant of Elvis himself. And it just, like I said, I think I've tried to express to you my love for Elvis. How close, and I haven't gotten into everything and how much I know Elvis, how long I've known Elvis. I haven't gone into that, but I think I've expressed my love and appreciation and my knowledge of Elvis and how I truly see him, how good he is. And as a child of abuse, woman, abused, school, everywhere, school, throughout relationships, husband, learning all about abuse, counseling abused people, working in the legal field, talking to parents that are divorcing and what they say about each other, and throwing that back, how the children are affected in the middle and how they feel about what's going on and what they're being told by their parents. Kind of like just, there's a whole big picture here that the likelihood, the easiest thing is to have her buried there. And there's a reason. She is, that is blood. Those are her, that's her daughter, and those are her grandchildren. She and Elvis's blood. From now, and as long as the children have children, that blood is commingled together. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying I'm happy about it. But it probably was decided when Lisa was a child by the grandfather, by Lisa's grandfather, probably decided, this is so forgiving. And everybody who lived in Graceland, that family unit, everybody lived there. Minnie Mae, Vernon, Gladys, Elvis, Priscilla, and Lisa Marie. That was the family unit. 6 graves for that family unit, for that historical moment in time, kind of preserving that moment in time. And as a grandfather who had a couple of years left to live himself, probably wasn't well himself, at the time either. Whether that was the right decision or wrong decision, but grandfathers make, well, she's taking care of my granddaughter. And, in the end, in the future, my granddaughter, despite all of the mother's flaws that he knew of at the time, he certainly didn't know all of them and would never know all of them. We always look at our parents and see their many flaws. My father had many flaws. The child, I told you, I was a child, grew up of, but I took care of him till his death. I took care of him and my mother, no matter how they treated me. And in the end, I got him to go to the hospital out of love. I want you to live to see Tom Brady win his last Super Bowl. I know I'll lose a lot of subs and just by saying Tom. So, a lot of people hate Tom Brady, but it doesn't really matter. There's a lot of things that he liked that I would never like. He did that I would never do. Ways he treated me that were just awful. But he liked it. And we could talk about it and shared that together because you had to find things to share. Despite all the differences, you're taking care of him day after day, 24 hours a day. The man who broke one hip and then he broke the other hip. and had a catheter. It's just awful. You can imagine, but isn't like I haven't done that for elderly people before, but 24 hours a day. But you have to find things in common and talk about things to make things happy, about things that make them happy. And sometimes it doesn't really matter. Even if I hated Tom Brady or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're taking care of a human being. They're at the end of their life. And though my mother did change, she got nicer at the end, but she was so weak she couldn't think anymore. But she got nicer. So it's very easy to forgive, and it's very easy to forgive, especially when they're weak and they're sick and they're dying. When you see a human being suffering, it doesn't matter what they've done, you forgive. It's so easy to forgive, and you want to make them happy. And so Vernon, I'm sure, saw many of Elvis's relatives died. Actually, most of them died in their 40s. They did not live past 40. And through his life, he saw many die, and they had such a hard life. And he knows that at the end, you forgive no matter what they've done, and you bury them right, and you take care of them right. No matter what he did, what my mother did, it doesn't matter. At the end, you forgive, and you do the right thing. So being good Christians, they belonged to every church in the city, wherever they lived. They went to every single church. They went to revival meetings every night and spent hours singing. They know, doesn't matter what Priscilla may or may have done. At that time, you had no idea. Looking at it that way, they know that at the end, if Lisa lived and she watched her mother die, she may have said, "All right, Mama, I forgive you." Because you don't know what happens between people at the end. Priscilla might even have said, "Forgive me, I'm sorry. I realize." You have no idea. Or you just forgive them because you see them in their human weakness. And it's so awful to see them delirious and weak, and you just want to take care of them. All of a sudden, they become your child, and you want to take care of them. It's like, this is your sick child, and you want them to live. It's like you forget everything else. So I think Vernon, from the experience of a Southern, very Christian, God-loving Southern man who saw a lot of death and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, probably saw a lot of abuse, and he also saw a lot of forgiveness. That sixth grave, he knew if Lisa's anything like Elvis, she, even at the end, no matter what her mother's done to her, she's going to forgive her, and she's going to do as every good Christian or anybody who loves God, anybody who grew up the values, she's going to forgive. She's going to forgive and just do the right thing for your parent. Just because honor thy father, thy mother, one of the 10 commandments. I'm sure that's what was in his head. So I'll do another show on the many things that Priscilla said that totally disprove her story about Elvis. Speaking from a woman who truly does know abuse, has counseled women who are abused, was trained in counseling, trained in learning about abuse from childhood to adulthood, and women in particular who are abused. Speaking from all that, and also legally speaking, when you kind of know when somebody has no idea what they're talking about, changing their story, and you can actually prove in photographs that her story makes no sense. I can show you 2 photographs that totally disprove her story. And it's almost like she's clueless, that she doesn't even, from one minute to the next, she doesn't know what she's saying. But anyway, I hope that you understand where I stand with Elvis and understand why it's most likely I would say, let's say 99.99999%. That 6th grave was Priscilla's. And Lisa may have buried Benjamin in there because maybe she was doing it possibly to not have her mother buried in there, or she just wanted her son buried there. Maybe not even to get back at him, just because she wanted him buried next to her. She knew she'd be buried there, and she probably knew that because it was a public cemetery, that the likelihood that if someone else or the rest of her family could be buried there if they wanted to. It might not be that she did this and she planned this, like this guy who runs this chain. He's great. The information is great. It might not be that she pulled this fast one. It just could be, I want my son buried next to me. He should be buried at Graceland. He died too young. He blew his brains out during the pandemic while the riots were going on. Who wasn't depressed? Many people blew their brains out and died during that time. So it could be just a mother burying her son and no grand plan to prevent her mother from being buried there. It could be just as simple as that. Just like Vernon deciding it might not be her womanly wiles or threatening to write or do something against Elvis. I personally, deep in my heart, I actually don't, though that you could say it, I don't feel it. I just feel that that's as Vernon speaking, knowing what I know of that, of his family and the way people thought back then. No matter how people used to get abused and beat up by their parents all the time, beaten badly. But when your father died, you did what was right, what God would want. You honor your father by mother. You give them the proper Christian burial because you want them to go to heaven. Even, especially if they really, really need forgiveness. You want to do right by them because that's the Christian thing, forgiveness. So that's what I think he did. I truly do. Legally speaking, my life experience, just experience, legal and life experience, and trained, speaking from all these, and my knowledge of Elvis, my grand and deep understanding of who that man actually was. Anyway, it's almost 1. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for listening. Please leave a comment below so you let me know your thoughts on what I said. Just your thoughts on this whole difficult matter. It's kind of a difficult matter, upsetting to many Elvis fans, but just leave some comments and let me know. Okay? God bless you. And I'll see you again soon. Wednesday, I'm hoping for another live stream that will be on these very 3 channels. The channels that I'm streaming on right now. If you're watching me on any of these channels, that next live stream will be on Wednesday. And it'll be it's about a very interesting person. Maybe the opposite of Elvis. He's kind of spooky, let's just say. Okay, good night and God bless you, and I hope you have a good day tomorrow. All right? Alrighty, and forgive someone and it'll make you feel really good. Okay, do something good like Elvis. So just anything, just even if it's a kind word, it makes you feel good, especially in these horrible times. Okay, good night. God bless you. Thank you so much. And if you're still here, Black Samurai, God bless you. Thank you for joining me. Mark Dietz, God bless you. Thank you for joining me. Anybody else out there, I don't know your name, but God bless you. Thank you for joining me. And if you're interested in any of the information in the stream, please rewind it and watch it again. It's a lot of good information, a lot of legal, a lot of from my experience, training and experience. And I think you're going to like it. Okay. God bless you and good night.